Welcome to the Gen Z Marketer podcast, where we have marketing conversations and everything in between. Here we talk about marketing, branding, e commerce, and the power of integrated marketing communication. I'm your host, Jamia O'Malley, a strategist passionate and specializing in branding and marketing for e commerce. In this episode, I will be discussing the five undisputed laws of branding. This is based on Ries and Ries, the 22 Immutable Laws of Branding. However, I have focused on five laws that are undisputable, regardless of category, and are relevant in brand building. The rest of the laws may be applied on the other phases of branding, which I will be discussing in the next episodes. I have identified these five laws as the one you should take to heart, and by the end of the episode, you should be branding with these in mind. Before we get started, don't forget to support the show by following the podcast to get notified on the latest uploads. When it comes to marketing and branding, the book tells us, and this is something that I've already talked about in previous episodes, that marketing is not selling. Marketing is building a brand in the mind of the prospect. If you can build a powerful brand, you will have a powerful marketing program. If you can't, then all the advertising, fancy packaging, sales promotion, web designs, and public relations in the world won't help you achieve your objective. And the power of a brand lies in its ability to influence purchasing behavior. So, we have said this before in previous episodes that marketing and branding are complementary. They're two sides of the same coin, and that you can't have an effective marketing or integrated marketing campaign if you don't have a brand. Now, let's talk about the five undisputed laws of branding. And I'm going to start with the first two laws. The first one is the law of expansion, which is the power of a brand is inversely proportional to its scope. The second one, which is the law of contraction, states that a brand becomes stronger when you narrow its focus. So the laws of expansion and contraction are related to one another. The broader the scope, the weaker the brand becomes. A brand is strong when it has a narrowed, specific focus. So, short term versus long term. Do you broaden the line in order to increase sales in the short term? Or do you keep a narrow line in order to build the brand in the mind and increase sales in the future? Do you build the brand today in order to move merchandise tomorrow? Or do you expand the brand today in order to move goods today and see it decline tomorrow? Many brands assume that in order to grow, they need to expand. In reality, the more a brand expands, the less powerful it becomes. In the short term, brands might be successful when they expand, but in the long term, the model expansion undermines the brand name in the mind of the consumer. Instead, customers want brands that are narrow in scope and are distinguishable by a single word, the shorter the better. Many companies actually try to justify line extension by invoking the master brand, super brand, or mega brand concept. But people don't think this way. In their minds, most people try to assign one brand name to each product, and they are not consistent in how they assign such names. So they tend to use the name that best captures the essence of the product. It could be the mega brand name or the model name or a nickname. So, but rather than, expanding or, being a broad brand, you should be a specialist rather than a generalist. This is what the laws of expansion and contraction tells us. An example of this is Beauty MNL. Rather than focusing on beauty and skincare and building its strength around those categories, they have since expanded to other categories such as fashion and home products. You might think, isn't expansion a good thing and reflective of success? Like we said earlier, not necessarily. The problem with this strategy is that they have thousands of SKUs from different brands and categories. Rather than introducing brands that are not available or hard to find in the Philippines, they have given this space to irrelevant categories. The third law, which is the law of the word, a brand should strive to own a word in the mind of the consumer. So if you want to build a brand, you must focus your branding efforts on owning a word in the prospect's mind, a word that nobody else owns. You know your brand owns the category name when people use your brand name generically. So an example is Kleenex. It owns the word tissue. So how many times have you heard someone use the word Kleenex and tissue interchangeably? And for Band-Aid, they own adhesive bandages. Ziploc owns zippable plastic bags. Xerox owns photocopiers, and Pampers owns diapers. So words are the key to brand building. Reality, of course, rests in a visual world of shapes, colors, textures, and dimensions. But reality has no meaning without the context provided by the human mind. The mind gives meaning to visual reality by using words. The same is true of the product or service you are selling. The product itself might have a visual reality, but it's the brand name and its associations that give the product meaning in the consumer's mind. You should not ask what percentage of an existing market your brand can achieve, but you should ask how large a market your brand can create by narrowing its focus and owning a word in the mind. Sometimes your brand word is already your brand name, which is why unique and catchy names are important. If you have a generic name, your brand will get lost in the sea of words that we have. Our example, Beauty MNL, is somewhat in between. They obviously are focused in beauty in Manila, and even the first thing that would come to mind is beauty products. So why did they expand to other categories when their focus is beauty? Sephora, on the other hand, is a global version of Beauty MNL. They have a unique name that has brand recall and their focus is still in beauty. When you say Sephora, you think of beauty. The same could no longer be said for Beauty MNL. Next, we have the law of credentials. The crucial ingredient in the success of any brand is its claim to authenticity. The best way to establish that claim is by creating a new category in which your brand can become the leader. But what do we mean with authenticity? Is it about having an original product and category? Yes, but it's more than that. It's also about being true to who you claim to be. Consumers now are smarter and can see through you. They are suspicious and tend to disbelieve most product claims. Your brand might last longer, require less maintenance, and be easier to use, but who will accept claims like these? Authenticity is built and established through credibility. Your credentials or social proof are the guarantee to the performance of your brand. When you have the right credentials, your prospect is likely to believe almost anything you say about your brand. Let's go back to our example, which is Sephora. Sephora built its credentials of being the one stop shop that offers sought after beauty brands. Their authenticity was built and grown on that, and when they expanded globally, everyone knew what Sephora was, what it had, and who it was for. They are unlike Beauty MNL, who has expanded to other categories. Sephora was able to focus and be a specialist in the industry. Next, we have the law of quality. So, quality is important, but brands are not built by quality alone. Quality, or rather the perception of quality, resides in the mind of the buyer. If you want to build a powerful brand, you have to build a powerful perception of quality in mind. How do you build a powerful perception? We mentioned previously that when you narrow your focus, you become a specialist rather than a generalist. And a specialist is generally perceived to know more. In other words, to have higher quality than a generalist. Pricing is one of the strongest influences on perception. For different product categories, you have benchmarks of what prices are considered to be mass, masstige, and prestige. Higher pricing is a benefit to customers as it allows the affluent customer to obtain psychic satisfaction from the public purchase and consumption of a high end brand. In Jurassic World, Doctor Who had a line in the movie saying that you cannot have an animal with exaggerated predator features without the corresponding behavioral traits. The same goes with quality. You cannot have a brand with exaggerated pricing without having the corresponding quality. The law of authenticity also applies, in which you have to be true to who you claim to be. Claiming to be prestige should be backed by your credentials. Lastly, we have the law of category. A leading brand should promote the category, not the brand. The most efficient, most productive, most useful aspect of branding is creating a new category. In other words, narrowing the focus to nothing and starting something totally new. At this point, however, nothing is totally new. Differentiated categories are created by looking at something in a different angle and identifying a specific focus and segment. Customers don't really care about new brands, they care about new categories. And if you eventually have competition in your category, do you compete as a brand to push them out? No. Competition is healthy for categories as it increases customer interest. It can also expand your market and actually end up creating more business for your brand. So, how do you select a category? How do you win in a category? My answer, it doesn't matter. If you are focused on the right people, then you are winning in your category. Now that we have discussed the five undisputed laws of branding, what would you like to hear next? Do you have other brands in mind when you think of these laws? I'd love to hear from you at the Gen Z Marketer Podcast on Facebook, at Gen Z MKT on Instagram, and at www.genzmkt.com.